Hi, I'm Amber.
And hi, I'm Brenda, and this is the Minority Millennial Money Podcast. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Minority Millennial Money. Today, we're going to talk about a topic that's really interesting, and it's money and dating, which is pretty prevalent amongst all single millennials. So today we have a special guest, and his name's Brian, and he's going to give us our male perspective. So Brian, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Brian Williams. I am an Austin native, born and raised. I met Brenda actually on a Bumble date, so this is actually perfect. We have some experience, and she can call me if anything I say isn't true. So I'm looking forward to talking to y'all and giving some male perspective.
Well, that just started it off.
Yeah. So we had several listener questions, and I have 3 case scenarios or case studies that I wanted to talk about because I feel like money, like Amber and I have talked about, is like a very taboo subject, and it's very interesting to kind of figure out what everyone's comfort level is. And so one of the questions was, how much should you spend on a first date? So Brian, from your perspective, I want to hear what you anticipate to spend on a first date.
I think that's a good question. It depends on the date, but if you're just going out for drinks, I mean, I wouldn't want to crack more than 50.
50? Okay. I think that's fair. I was thinking like $30 to $50, assuming that you're just like going out for drinks or maybe some food. What about you, Amber? I know you live in a higher cost of living area. So what's like average in your area?
Yeah, I mean, like Hawaii, probably one meal. I mean, it really depends on where you go. Like if you're going to just do coffee or something like that, obviously it's going to be a lot cheaper. But, dinner is probably like $30 per person, I would say.
Wow.
So at least 25 to 30 per person.
Okay.
That's
So
about right.
Brian, we live in a pretty high cost of living area too. So do you ever invite anyone out for like a full meal on a first date?
On a first date, generally no. Because I mean, I think most guys are aware that, there is an expectation, kind of whether, it's 2021, but whether we want to admit it or not, I think most guys kind of feel obligated to at least offer to pay on the first date. And so I think we're also aware that, not all women, but there are a select few out there that kind of use the dating apps as a meal ticket. So I wouldn't want to get caught up in anything like that. And so I think coffee or maybe a few drinks is a good starting point.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay.
I think coffee is the most appropriate, in my opinion, because you don't want to spend extra time on someone that you know immediately that you don't like or don't want to spend more time with.
Yeah, I definitely can speak to the fact that I've been on dates where I'm like very thankful that we just went out to get coffee because I don't want to be there any longer. And then also
I totally
alcohol kind of like makes you a little bit, your inhibitions are down and it's just different than just getting like a regular drink. Yeah. So another question was, when do you talk about salary with someone that you're dating? Like say you're dating and like you are no longer seeing other people and you want to have some kind of money talk. Like when do you do that?
I would say that's pretty far down the line. I mean, when you first meet someone, obviously you're going to talk about their job like right off the bat. And so I think it's pretty easy to kind of get an idea of a range of where they are. But as far as
Yeah.
specific numbers, I mean, I would reserve that. I mean, at least, gosh, like a couple months in. I mean, for me, I just, I wouldn't want anybody to be interested for the wrong reasons. So I'm sure a lot of guys feel like that. So,
Yeah.
general idea, but I think specific numbers, I mean, you have to be pretty serious to actually share that information with someone. I am an accountant though, so uh, maybe I have a different perspective. I don't know. What do y'all think?
I mean,
Oh, go ahead, Amber.
no, go ahead.
Well, I just think we should have done a little bit more of an introduction. So people who have been listening to the podcast know that I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm pursuing a PhD. Amber's a lawyer in the Army Reserves. And then Brian is an accountant here in the Austin area. So we're all like minorities, millennials, and Brian's a homeowner and house hacks. And so we all kind of we have an interest in the FIRE movement, right? And so I think that we are a little bit more maybe aware and maybe not as, we don't consider money like such a taboo topic as other people would. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, completely. I mean, Brenda and I, we hit it off on the money subject pretty much immediately. I mean, on our second date, we were talking about fire, and 401ks and Roth IRAs, and, which is pretty common for me. I'm not sure
But
about
you were
that,
surprised that I knew like the
but
401k limit.
absolutely. I mean, I think for me in particular, it was very attractive to be able to talk to someone who, was self-sufficient, took care of what she needed to do, very responsible, and wasn't afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. Sorry, Amber. So you were going to say something before this. I just wanted to set the background.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you're right. Like if you're in the FIRE community for sure. But I think otherwise it's kind of inappropriate a little bit to discuss salary. Also, like I think you should do reasonable research. Maybe it's just the attorney in me or the former investigative journalist, but you should be doing reasonable research about who this person is before you meet them. So I already know someone's salary before I meet them. So I mean, like, there's no reason to discuss because I already know how much they make. So I think it's so inappropriate for someone to be like, oh, how much money do you make? It's just like, a lot of this stuff is public. I'm a government attorney, so pretty much all of my salaries are public. So like if you want to know them, you can look them up and you generally know how much someone makes depending on what their career is. So, it's not like we're 16 years old working at, minimum wage. Like everyone knows basically what their income is. So you should date in your income bracket.
The only caveat to that is like you could be with someone who's a very high income earner who has a lot of debt.
True.
Right? So like you could like, I dated people who are physicians who like make really good money, but they have $300,000 in debt. So like the net worth doesn't really match up.
I mean, I think that there's difference between good debt and bad debt though. Like if you have $300,000 because you went to medical school, personally, I wouldn't see that as a negative from your net worth. Versus you have $300,000 in credit card debt.
Completely agree. I mean, at one point, after I bought my second house, I had, I think, over $350,000 in debt. And that was kind of a crazy thing to just see on a spreadsheet and look at. But if it's backed by an asset, an income generating asset, then just like Amber said, it's good debt.
Right. And I don't really think about my mortgages as debt, honestly, because they're assets. And so, especially now with the Austin market being so hot, like I'm like, oh, well, I can really sell that at any time, like take out the equity, although I don't want to. And we talked about that in the real estate episode. But yeah, I mean, it just depends on what kind of debt and why that person got into that debt, right?
I feel like it comes up. Like someone usually says like, oh, I have school debt, or, oh my gosh, I'm trying to pay off my credit card. Like as you continue talking to someone, those topics just generally come up. And so if you find that someone, like if I go out with somebody and I think, they make $50,000 a year and they drive a Tesla, like, okay, like you obviously have considerable debt. So, you pretty much can find out the information just by having a conversation.
But I did see you tweet earlier that you might lease a Tesla, Amber.
Yes, I did, but I have multiple jobs and incomes and can afford a Tesla.
True.
A lease. I'm surprised.
I know we talked about leasing a car.
Watch our last episode where I talk about how I only believe in leasing cars. I know it's really crazy.
I know she's crazy. So another question was, so we said, when should we talk about salary? Another thing was like, how much should you spend on gifts for someone that you're dating?
Sure. I mean, that's also a function of time. I mean, say you just start dating and their birthday's coming up, $100. But, as time as time goes on, maybe year 2, year 3, I mean, you should probably at least a couple hundred. Although personally, I don't think gift giving is my love language. It's more of quality time and physical touch. So, I would prefer to get them something that's useful, that they would use every day, as opposed to something that's just outright expensive, for expensive sake.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I vehemently hate gifts. Like I there's
I
don't like gifts. No. Like, what is someone gonna buy me that I want that I can't buy myself?
Flowers. You wouldn't like flowers?
Yeah, but I don't view that as like a gift, right? Like he's saying like $100 gift, right? Flowers, that's just like a gesture. I don't see that as like a material gift.
Okay.
So yeah, if someone sent me flowers, that's nice, or dinner or something like that. But I don't want some material thing. What am I gonna do with that? What am I gonna do with it?
So like, for example, last year I got AirPod Pros from someone.
I mean, if I wanted them, I would just buy.
I didn't really want them. They weren't even on my radar, but I was like, oh, this is nice. But yeah, it was a little bit extra. It was a little bit much.
I feel like it's harder to buy gifts for somebody when they already have money. Like I don't know if you guys like follow Cardi B and Offset, and they like buy each other these like lavish gifts all the time and like these cars. It's like Cardi doesn't even have a driver's license. It's like, what's the like you're just like buying all these things. Like I feel that's how I feel. It's just like, what are you gonna give me? Like I don't want anything. Like maybe, yeah, like I can't think of anything that I want actually.
I completely agree. It's the thought that goes into the gift. Now, if it's something expensive that is meaningful and thoughtful, sure. And if you've been dating long enough, sure. But I think most people would agree, a thoughtful gift that wasn't necessarily expensive, that has utility, that they'd use every day, is has a lot more value to that person than just expensive, expensive like jewelry or flowers or what have you.
Yeah, I would rather someone save up, like instead of getting me flowers a few times a month, like just save up that money and get me something nicer in the future. But anyway, gifts are a weird thing. And like, I was talking to some other people about it and they were like, well, if you give a gift, like a big gift too soon, it may come off like too eager or like you're too invested. And it's like, it's quite early in the relationship, and so you don't want to.
Yep.
What was that?
Wait, what did you say?
Simping.
Simping?
No, I completely agree. If you're coming off just trying to buy someone off, or I don't know what your intention is, just try to impress someone or to make yourself look better, to make yourself feel better for having a lot of money. I mean, I don't think that's the way to go. But everybody's different, and I'm sure a lot of people do enjoy receiving super expensive gifts. So teach their own.
That I've had people give me like flowers and stuff like within a week of knowing them, and I did feel like it was a little bit excessive. And I just wasn't like that into it. Like I liked the flowers, but it didn't make me like him anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. So another question was joint bank accounts while you're dating.
No way.
No.
Absolutely not. I mean, honestly,
absolutely not.
I would say it's it's tentative if you're married. I mean, it's I can see
We're on the same page because
it
I've
just
actually had a joint bank account with someone I dated, and I thought it was great.
really.
What?
So I mean, I'm curious, Brenda. So what was great about it? And do you feel like one person took advantage or sort of, wasn't contributing
So
as much as the other?
the way it worked out was that I made a significant amount more than him. And so I wanted our expenses as a couple to be fair. And so we opened a joint bank account and both put in like 5 to 10% of our income into it. So it was like a percentage based thing. And then anytime we went out together, we just spent out of that account. And actually, that was great. And that worked out wonderfully. There were other things that ended the relationship, but I do see myself doing that again, like with my next long-term relationship, just because it's kind of also like a test to see if that person like can follow through on depositing into that account and like just being accountable to that account. And then it's not always like, it's kind of like our money. It creates a sense of like community money that we're spending together instead of like you paid, I paid, you paid, I paid. And like it may not be even. And so because I made significantly more than him, I felt like that would be the best way to be fair.
Mm-hmm. But you were still contributing more because on a percentage basis, your salary was higher.
Right. So if I contributed 10% and he contributed 10%, it was more from me, but I didn't really mind because I felt like the same amount of skin was in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. I could definitely see that.
And a lot of people gave me a hard time about it because I'd probably only known him like 2 months when we did that, but I trusted him and like I got
We're right sitting here like,
are you crazy? I mean, I get it. I get that you can kind of keep tabs on a person. You can see how much you're spending, maybe see where they're going. But 2 months, Brenda, come on. That's
first of all,
premature.
after I end your relationship, I'm cutting all ties. I'm not going to discuss cutting a bank account off. I'm not going to discuss anything. I'm done. How do you split the money after the relationship ends?
So we really didn't have much money in that account when we broke up because we had gone on a trip and like basically spent all the money in that account. And so we just closed it. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. And yeah, I did get a lot of crap from people being like, oh my gosh, what if he just withdraws everything and like runs off with it? And I was like, honestly, like it's not that much to me if he did. And also like, well, then that's the end of that. Like I thought it was kind of like a test. So that was one of my case studies. And actually that was like my ideal situation. Where you kind of like evenly split the expenses of the relationship. I don't know. Maybe y'all think differently.
I mean, I could see that, but I also think, if you have a joint bank account for, say, trips or going out, that kind of promotes excessive spending, in my opinion. I'd prefer to have maybe, if we were to go joint, let's have like a joint savings account or a joint retirement account or something, or maybe a joint fund so we can buy a house or something like that. But to me, that seems just rife for just overspending. But that's just me, the accountant.
Really? You think it promotes overspending?
For sure. If you're contributing that for the sole reason of your fun money, entertainment, going out, I mean, you're always going to like, oh, we can just go spend it out of this, and it's leaving your paycheck before it even hits your personal checking account. So you've already earmarked X amount of money in addition to your own personal spending for going out. That's just in my opinion. I prefer to, if we were to contribute to something together, I'd prefer it to be an asset or an investment.
Okay, I get that. What about you, Amber?
I mean, no, and no again. I mean, I think I've basically said, like, no. No.
It worked out for me, so I'm just saying that. And then obviously, I think in marriage, like if I were to be married, like we definitely have to have a joint bank account. If we're living together, if we're paying for like living expenses together. Have you either of y'all lived with a partner before?
I did when I was 21.
Okay.
Terrible mistake. We didn't make it the entire lease. I think breaking up like 9 months in. She ended up moving out. I paid for the rest of the apartment on my own for the last 3 months. It was very messy. And so I wouldn't live with somebody that I am not engaged to.
Same.
Yeah, no,
same.
I've never lived with anyone. As far as the joint account in marriage, I don't know.
She's a lawyer though, so
she's been around the block. She's seen it.
Yes, and I've told Brenda this before. I don't know if I've ever said this on the podcast, but I've literally done child support enforcement, felony child support enforcement, where millionaires have literally ran off with their secretaries, and then the wife who quit her job, who was relying on this man for 10 years, who has no job experience now and relevant job experience now, is in the food stamp line because her husband stopped paying, the alimony and the child support, because he's off with his secretary creating a new family. So when you set yourself up like that and you assume that liability, realize that you're assuming that you're making permanent decisions based on that. And personally, I want a prenup. I already have it written in my head of like what I want already. So like, I'm not willing to take on that type of liability. It really would depend on who the person was. And even if I agreed to have a joint account in marriage, I would still have my own personal accounts.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, I do agree with that. I do agree with still having your own money to spend on your own things.
Right. I find it interesting that the accountant and the lawyer have similar feelings on this matter.
I'm over here like the softy healthcare provider. I'm like, I'll open an account.
Brenda will open an account with anyone. I just think it's not really about emotions, right? Like, so I think that's where a lot of people get caught up in it. Like, there's an emotional part of a relationship, and then there's a practical part of it. And you just have to make sure that your practical mind is in charge of your finances and your liability. So.
Yeah. And see, the word liability is just like, I feel like it's coming out of nowhere. Like, what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess that's maybe a lawyer term. I'm not sure. So basically, liability just means that you are taking on risk. So if you, buy a home, right, you're taking on that liability. If that home burns down, or if someone, does something to that home, you are assuming that liability. So if you go sign up for a gym, right, usually you have to sign a waiver saying, I'm assuming risk. I am working out at this gym. I'm going to rock climb. I'm going to do whatever the activities are. And if I fall, I'm assuming that risk. So that's what you're doing. It's a liability waiver. So when you enter into a relationship, you are waiving liability. You are taking on that risk from that person. And so when you choose a person, you have to wonder, if this risk, am I willing to take it? What are their issues? Do they not have money? Do they not have good mental health? You have to decide whether or not that liability, if you're willing to take all that on. So, adding more risk to the situation is just like making it worse. Because I want to go to Chipotle maybe, and this person doesn't like Chipotle. And if I, go to Chipotle and use our card, and then he's like, oh, you just spent, Chipotle every single day. I want to go to Chipotle without grief. I want to go to the spa.
Who doesn't like Chipotle?
Right. I want to go to the spa and spend $500.
Okay, now
without the other person knowing or giving you crap about it.
Exactly. And I want to do it monthly at least.
Right. At least.
With my own money. Yes.
Right. Right. But that's the line between having a joint bank account together for like fixed expenses. I think that's fair. And then having your own money. Like, what if you want to buy the other person a gift? You don't want them to know how much you spent on it. Right. So you want to have a private account. Is that fair?
Sounds like you're on our side, yeah.
I think some people have all of their finances blended.
My parents did. And I never saw them have problems over it, but I think that's like more of a boomer generation thing. Right?
My parents did and then didn't. So
oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And they're still together. So, it can create issues.
Wow, that's a hard conversation to have.
Right. Yeah. So how people do things in their marriage is really interesting, and none of us are married, so I guess we can talk about it in the future if we ever do get married. So one more question that people came up with was, and I think this was a guy asking, was like, how do you stay on a budget on a date without coming off as cheap or broke?
Is this a budget for one date or a budget for a relationship?
A budget for a date.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
hard.
Brian, let's hear from you because you're the guy here.
I mean, I think if you're dating in the first place, as a guy or as a girl, you there's an expectation that you're going to be spending money.
Mhm.
I have an entertainment line in my budget, and dating falls into that, So,
Oh, wow. Okay.
yeah, exactly. So, if you're actually budgeting and you're taking care of your own personal finances, then it shouldn't be that difficult because you know that, I have X amount of money left in my budget. I shouldn't spend it. Now, if you're having a great time, okay, sure. If you're having an awesome night, you're out in town, something comes up, you want to go like a show or something, sure, do it. But, you have to, it comes down to your personal finance. And so I wouldn't sweat it if you're having a great time. But then, say you get back and you realize you spent a little bit too much. Okay, well, maybe, let's not go on a date, or let's stop swiping for a little bit. And, fill the coffers.
The old stop swiping technique.
Just waiting for a little bit.
That's hilarious. So I kind of already brought one of them up, but I had like 3 scenarios. Like one of them was the guy that I had the joint bank account with, who was my ideal scenario because I felt very good about that. And if we had not had other problems, that relationship probably would have gone very well. But then there was like the guy who spent way too much money and was wealthy, so it didn't matter. And that kind of made me uncomfortable, right? Like, have either of y'all ever dated someone who was like way, like maybe grew up with money or like didn't really have a sense of like finances or like taking care of them?
Absolutely. I mean, it can be frustrating when you feel like the money that you're spending on the relationship is hard earned and the money that they're spending on the relationship isn't. It comes down to the amount of time and value. I mean, time is money, right? So that's time that you have worked outside that's contributing. And if you don't feel like the other person is doing the same, I can absolutely see how that could create problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've dated privileged people before, but I mean, they just pay for everything. So I have no objections. I don't. Not a problem.
Yeah, I have too, but I actually felt weird about it, and I felt like I just wasn't that lifestyle wasn't really for me.
Well, but he was taking on vacations though, so say more about this. Because was it the vacations? Because that's a little different than going on a date and someone paying.
Well, even the dates were like at these places where I knew it was like a $300 dinner, and I was just like, ugh, like I knew he had it, but it was, I don't know, it just still felt weird. And maybe that's just like the daughter of working class people, or it was that I felt like it was not really worth that. But yeah, it was mostly in vacations and like flying first class. Like that's not something that I would do regularly unless it was like a really cheap upgrade, or like staying at places like the Ritz or just 5-star hotels. You know, like I'm not complaining, like they were really nice, but I also felt like it upset the power dynamic, right? Like now all of a sudden I'm somewhat beholden to this person because they've spent money on me that I would not be able to spend on myself. And
Yeah.
so I felt some pressure to go along with whatever he wanted. And when I didn't, it was a problem.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I
it's
mean, it could
not
also be seen as a bit wasteful. Yeah, I mean, you know,
wasteful.
there are better things to spend money on than just opulent vacations and going out to dinner, fancy dinners every night, and you know, eating sushi on rooftops downtown.
That sounds like my life
I
now.
mean, like I'm sure anybody listening to this podcast, you know, has a sense of what can be excessive and what can't. So I completely understand why it can make someone uncomfortable because you're just like, is this the way they're going to spend money for the rest of our lives? If we're together, are they
Right.
expect to do this forever? You know.
But what
So
is the
Right.
income? What is the yearly income for this person though?
Like 450 to 500,000 a year.
So I mean, they're acting their wage, I think, right? Like, you know,
Yeah,
this
definitely. I mean,
baby is not something that someone who's making minimum wage would be able to purchase. Like, I'm sure me going to the spa, you know, $500 spa days once a month or twice a month is outrageous to someone who's making minimum wage, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, this girl's spending so much money," but
to
it's
you, it's not that
not
much.
a lot
it's
of money.
relative. I'll go
Yeah.
with that. It is definitely relative.
It is relative, but at the same time, you have to partner up with someone who's on kind of the same wavelength, right? Like, for example, my brother and his wife were here this week, and we were talking about going to this elephant reserve like 45 minutes away, but it's like $120 per person, right? And so they have 2 kids too. And so we were like, okay, it's going to be $500 for their family alone. Plus I'd have to get my ticket. And I was like, is that really worth it? And we were all kind of like, not really. You know, so we decided not to go to the elephant reserve. But I would hate, well, I wouldn't hate, but it would be difficult if I was with someone who was like, let's go, let's go, let's go. Like, let's spend $500, you know? And I would just be like, it's not reasonable. Like, the kids are not old enough to remember this. It's not really that great. Like, I just don't care about elephants that much, you know?
Yeah,
So you kind of
completely.
need to find someone who's going to be reasonable and agree with you on those things.
Completely. And I'll just make one more point about it. I mean, it goes kind of with the law of diminishing returns. If you're doing it all the time, you're doing it, you know, you're going out nightly, it loses its value. You know, so I would much
Totally.
prefer to just to save that up. And then actually, you know, when you're going out, go hard, you have some incredible experience that you'll never forget, less frequently than just, you know, every night doing it, because, you know, it loses value.
That's true. Yeah. When you're dating a lot though, you kind of get used to it.
I think though also like some people need to read the room though. Like, so if you have a lot of money, like Brenda, you have enough money to go to see the elephants if you wanted to, right? But obviously your brother, he has a bigger family.
Expenses.
Exactly. So of course you're not going to be like, I have to go see the elephants. I can afford to see the elephants. Read the room. Like, the people that you're with obviously can't afford to go see the elephants. So, or they could afford it, but it's
not
more
worth
of,
it.
exactly. So I think that like if someone's reasonable, they can be rich or, you know, make $500,000 a year, but still be able to be like, okay, like I'm not gonna go say we need to see the elephants.
Right. Exactly. And so that's kind of the thing in finding someone in dating, that you can find that are reasonable the way you're reasonable, right? Because they might think that $120 is nothing.
Totally, totally. Yeah, just have to be on the same page. It's just one of those things that can it can be a point of conflict, or you can be on the same page.
So, Brian, I do want to get some insight from you because this is something that I've heard from men in general, is that they feel that women are expectant of men to pay for everything. Do you think that's the case?
So I don't think I think there are some, sure. And it's a spectrum for anything. I do think that most guys do feel at least the obligation to offer to pay, and especially on the first date. I kind of use it as a test personally. I'll always offer to pay, but I'll say about half the time, the girl will offer to split the check. And when that happens, okay, I'm like, okay, so she's not looking for handout. She wants to be next. She wants this to be a true partnership. So
Mm.
I personally use it as a litmus test.
I do
Okay.
too. I use it as a litmus test. I offer, and if I'm paying money, I will not go out with that person again. So I also use it as a litmus test.
Yeah, I mean, if it's like the fifth or sixth date and she hasn't offered, and
That's rude.
I mean, I think that's where some guys start seeing, okay, like she expects this, and I think a lot of guys' behavior sort of can encourage it. It's it's a remnant of an older time, I think, and I think a lot of guys would appreciate if if they didn't feel that pressure, but it's just kind of the way it is.
Yeah, it's really hard now, I think, with our generation, just with women making more money, getting more education, and hopefully the gender wage gap minimizing. So then it's like that antiquated ideal of like men pay for stuff because they're showing you that they can provide for a family is like not really applicable anymore, right? Because now women are just have the same income earning capacity or very close to the same. So I've had a guy tell me like, well, I don't believe in reducing the gender wage gap because like I still have to pay for stuff, right? Like
I think, I mean, and girls spend a lot more on their appearance and the beauty and the makeup and the dresses.
right.
I'm sitting here, I get in the shower, comb my hair, put some moisturizer on, I'm good to go. I mean, y'all got nails, makeup, lipstick, like you got everything going on here. So
There's
there
a
are,
lot of maintenance.
yeah, there's a lot of maintenance. And a lot of guys, would be put off if, say, she didn't take the time to do those things.
I agree.
So there are different ways, and so that's why I don't mind. I don't mind offering to pay, especially on the first date. She's looking good. I know she's taking some time. She spent a little money on herself to make her look good for me. Then great. If she offers to pay, even better.
Right. Yeah. So in our generation, it's kind of like I can't really be upset if he lets me pay, right? Because technically I have a good income too. So like, but like then where's the pursuing? You know what I mean? Like where is it that you're showing me that you care about me, I guess? Because like I feel like money and time are the ways that people show that they value one another.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways you could show someone that you love them.
Yeah.
Just because they're not spending money on you doesn't really mean that they're not pursuing you. I mean, they could pursue you with like a poem, or they could pursue you. They could drop in on you at work, in a non-creepy manner. Like there's a lot of different ways, I think.
Do not go to my job.
So is there not a non-creepy manner to drop in? Say you want to take them to lunch or something, like.
Okay.
I need a calendar invite, but
She's gonna need a Google Calendar.
I mean, because
invite.
honestly, like as a lawyer, like I don't take lunch every day. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like I'm not able to do that. A lot of the times it's hustle and bustle. And, I've been in law jobs where I'm in court all the time. And so sometimes court is during lunch. Like I can't, I'm a professional. So it's like if you were dating a doctor, like, oh, hey, I came here to the hospital while you're performing a heart surgery to go to lunch. It's like, what are you talking about? Like,
Well, hopefully that person would know in advance that you wouldn't be available. But I think what Brian's saying is like, yeah, there are non-monetary ways to show that you appreciate someone. Sometimes though, in the early stages of dating, that may feel too much, don't you think?
I mean, maybe if you're bringing a poem on the first date, then yeah, that might be a bit much.
Do people still write poems? Like men still write poems for girls?
This guy?
You write? No, seriously. So you've written?
I have, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes with. I like to do a little beatboxing and freestyling on the side as well. You how to feed drinks with your friends and stuff. So I think it just kind of goes hand in hand. That's just my personality, though. Kind of a weird thing for an accountant to say, but
That's nice.
That is nice. It's also like I will say, like, being on the apps and stuff, I have come across like profiles where men are like, not here to be your meal ticket. And then I'm like, bro.
I'm sure he's speaking from experience, though.
Right. I'm like, did you really need to bring your past trauma though into the
Probably
Bumble
not
bio?
a good thing to put on the profile.
But then just like, why not date someone who, works a good job? I feel like a lot of men, they will go for like the McDonald's waitresses and then say something like that. And it's just like, well, why don't you want to date professionals? Because a lot of my other single lawyer female friends have been told a lot, like, you make too much money. We don't like that you're so independent. We're wanting to date like, a nice teacher or something like that. They don't want to date a high-powered attorney. And so if you've dated a McDonald's, cashier, what are you expecting?
Right. So Brian, I want you to speak to that a little bit. Like, are men like, I think you were pretty impressed by kind of like where I was in life and what I was doing. And so you kind of tend to gravitate towards women that are a little bit more accomplished. But like in general, do you think that men prefer someone who is like maybe just a teensy bit dependent?
It depends on the person. I know plenty of guys, who just be a kept man and, live off of their girl. Or, you got the deadbeat guys who aren't contributing anything. Now, as far as like professional, us millennials who kind of have our stuff together, I think honestly, most of us want an equal partnership. That's just me. I mean, why would you want to be in a position where you feel like you have a liability, like Amber said, or you feel obligated? Feel obligated to go out and spend your hard-earned money on someone that can't reciprocate the same way.
Right.
Now, I get it. If there's a connection, say you love your McDonald's waitress, there's all sorts of, and yeah, spend the money on her. If she doesn't have it, great. I don't think most guys don't necessarily want someone dependent on them, though. I mean, I'm sure Amber, there's a term for that in the Army, right?
What term are you referring to?
the dependopotamus.
I've heard of that.
So, and that's not used in a positive way. So I don't know. I don't want to be inappropriate, but just.
I have had other women tell me that, like, we're independent, we have our stuff together, and yet we struggle to find a man that can meet us there because either they're intimidated or they're turned off by our independence or they feel like they're not needed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are guys out there that feel that way. I'm sure there are women out there that feel that way. So
Mhm.
that's why it's so hard to find someone these days. I feel like.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Amber, can you think of any other questions we got?
I think that's pretty much it. I will say though that I see a lot from professional, especially minority women, who have a hard time
Mhm.
finding men who are at their same education and income level. And it's been a topic of discussion on many, series, especially like I know Black women who I think have one of the highest education levels or income levels or something like that. There's some statistic about it. Um, and it's hard for them slash us to find somebody who meets those standards. So, you know, it's hard to quantify that, I guess, in the dating realm.
Right.
It's tough out there.
It's tough out there for all of us.
I mean, I feel like if you're successful, you have your stuff together, you own real estate, you're contributing to your 401k, you're setting yourself up for a good future, you're already in a small minority. I mean,
True.
so to be able to find someone else, um, at that same level, it's going to be hard. I mean, you're picking from a smaller.
That's true.
Right. Like I don't know a lot of women like me in Austin. And Austin's just like a more white city. And then Brian, maybe you can tell me if you meet a lot of like I guess minority women who kind of have their life together, but it's kind of sad, that this isn't the norm. Because like Amber has mentioned on previous podcasts, like we just don't know, even if we were to come into money, like we just don't know what to do with it. Right.
Sure.
And so like you have done a great job, Brian. Like you bought a house when you were like 26. You had two houses at one point. You have one now. You're an accountant, right? So like by default, you're kind of like money savvy, right? Did you always feel that way?
I would say, I mean, growing up, we were very middle class, probably lower middle class, and so we had enough, but it was never extravagant, and it was always, and there were definitely times where it could get tight, and so I think growing up with that mindset, one, it keeps you hungry, but just like you said, you don't necessarily know what to do with it when you have it, and so I've always been sort of finance minded. I was a finance major in college. And so I developed a lot of those skills. My dad really got me into the stock market when I was young. I remember
Wow.
we used to check our quotes in the paper before the internet. So, gosh, I'm kind of dating
Oh,
myself, but so, it depends on the family. It depends on, you know, it depends on a lot of things. And it's unfortunate that, you know, being in debt and taking on all this debt and running up your credit cards, that's kind of the norm in America. So it's
right.
really great that people like you are having podcasts and conversations like this where it becomes more open, and maybe it'll spark someone to take control, take responsibility, do the hard thing, and delay gratification, save up, and position themselves for a better future.
Right. And I think for those people that aren't watching us on YouTube, like I'm Hispanic, I have Mexican immigrant parents, Amber's Black, and Brian is half Black and half white. So we're all coming from like a slightly different perspective. And I think for me also as a child of immigrants, like I feel a bit more of a responsibility to be more financially savvy because I felt like my parents made a big sacrifice for me to have these opportunities. So what do y'all feel in relation to like where you came from and how it makes you act towards your money now?
I mean, I can go on that. I've realized that I have had to overcome a scarcity mindset growing up.
Mm.
I feel like I've been maybe too conservative in some investments. I remember thinking about Tesla. I mean, just an example. A couple years ago, I was like, man, I really started to see the vision, but it was a high risk. It had already run up, to God knows what. And so I didn't want to risk something. And so I didn't. And, had I invested, that 10 grand, it'd probably be worth maybe 100 now, so definitely where you come from can affect your attitude towards money. And so in particular, that's something that I feel like, just not having a crazy amount of it growing up, it's something that I feel like I've had to overcome, to take more risks, calculated risks, obviously, to get ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely say like I'm always nervous about being poor again. And it's something I actually work on, like that kind of like PTSD, and I've been telling myself a lot lately, like, it's okay. Like if I lose everything I have the skills to just make it again. And so I keep telling myself that like multiple times a day if I need to, like it's okay.
Yes.
You're not going to be poor again. I mean, because sometimes I'll feel stressed and I'll get some canned ravioli and eat that for like a week, and I'll be like, I'm eating hot dogs and canned pork and beans. And I'm like, and it's just like, I have to remind myself, like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to be poor again. And so like that has helped me a lot. But it's really hard for me to spend money. Like I very rarely, like I go to the spa, I do a couple things that I like to do, but as a general, like I don't spend any money. I'm very, very frugal. And so it's something that I have to work on of like getting over that like PTSD.
Yeah, 100%.
That's a good way to put it, like as a PTSD, right? Because, but you in a sense had the advantage of having gone to college and having the grit and the drive to go to college, put yourself through undergrad and then put yourself through law school and like come to the other side and see that, you're building your net worth. But like for a lot of people, that's not the case, right? Like for a lot of people, they don't see the other side. And so I think that's kind of one of our goals in this podcast too, is to be like, hey, like, we're minorities, like in a sense, like we quote unquote, like made it, right? Like, I don't really ever think about being poor again. And relative to like when I was working full-time salary, like I make like half or less than half now that I'm in a PhD program, but I'm quite comfortable. And I think a big secret to that is also keeping my expenses low. Right. And I think a lot of minorities, like kind of like what you said, Amber, in the college episode about like a lot of minorities want to go into these professions that help people, but are relatively low paying. And so we can never really build wealth or be in those positions of power. In the same way, like we tend to do things that help our communities, which is great, but then we never get to attain those positions where we could really make a difference. Right. And so it's just like a weird dichotomy. And I think that, like, I don't know, Brian, like you're like half black and half white. So like, what is your experience as a person of like mixed race? Do you feel like a minority?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, although I wouldn't say, my mom, just because she was white doesn't mean that she was privileged,
Right.
So I would say that, I think they were pretty similarly situated on the socioeconomic economic ladder. Money affects culture. I mean, it does. I mean, that's, white privilege goes beyond just, not getting stopped by the cops or, having different experiences. I mean, there is generational wealth. And I think we're all acutely aware that the laws of this country, tax laws, they have systemically reduced the wealth of minorities, and they still do, and so it's hard to break the cycle, and I think it's incredible that when you have hardworking parents like yourself, Brenda, where they sacrifice so much and they put you in a position where you can be better. It's like you got to do it. You have to. You got to live up to it. And you got to make your parents proud. I mean, you can't let them sacrifice their whole lives and not become better. I mean, I think that's something that we all want to do. We all want to grow on our parents' legacy and be better.
Right. Right. And then also, I think with us living in Austin and like living in a predominantly white city with like a lot of white professional people, like it's hard to find a community of people that are like-minded and also not only white. Would you agree?
I agree. Yeah. Although,
Yeah.
if you put yourself out there, good things come. I think that's sort of
Yeah,
talk to getting over the scarcity mindset.
that's true.
Sometimes you gotta risk it for the biscuit.
That's the first time I've ever heard that.
Really?
Risk it for the biscuit.
I've never
That's
heard it. I
great.
never heard that.
I've never heard that, Brian.
Well,
That's
there you
funny.
go.
Anything else anyone wants to add specifically about dating? Because dating is like such a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would just say look for someone who you can tell has the same mindset as you
Values.
early. And if you can tell that it's not working out early, it's probably better not to get heavily involved with him in the long term, because I mean, what's the statistic? Most divorces are based on money, and it's
Right.
so if you start out in the right mindset on the same page as everyone else, you're probably going to be a lot better in the long term.
Right. Amber?
All right. That's it. That's all we got. That's all I got.
Cool. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. Let us know if you have any feedback. And
Wow, it's great
we'll see
being
y'all.
here.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.